Today, we are exposing the absolute worst neighbors in America. People who literally call 911 over a hot dog or demand a federal investigation into charcoal smoke. We will break down these insane complaints, explain how local laws actually apply, and give you a reality check on the absurd side of suburban living. Let us see what local authorities really deal with every single weekend. 1. Can you legally control the wind? One furious resident actually sent a formal cease and desist letter because the smell of grilling ribs dared to cross the property line into their vegan sanctuary. They seriously demanded the installation of a massive industrial fan to blow the meat smoke backward. Here is a quick meteorology lesson for that neighbor. You do not own the local airspace, and local ordinances absolutely protect normal cooking odors. The responding officers literally had to explain atmospheric pressure to a grown adult. Have you ever tried arguing with the wind? Because this person did. 2. Imagine waking up early on a Sunday to slow smoke a premium brisket, only to have a fully equipped fire engine come screaming down your street. That is exactly what happened when a neighbor reported a massive structural fire. The reality? They just hated the visual output of the smoker. Wasting emergency resources is not a joke. In almost every state, filing a false fire report to settle a petty neighborhood dispute can land you a massive fine or even jail time. Luckily, the brisket survived the ordeal, but that neighbor's reputation certainly did not. 3. Let us talk about the psychological warfare of homeowner associations. One family was hit with a hefty fine because their barbecue grill cover was charcoal gray instead of the legally mandated shade of beige. The official complaint claimed the dark fabric created a severe visual imbalance that was actively destroying neighborhood property values. Think about the mindset here. Someone is spending their precious weekend patrolling backyards with a color swatch just to feel a tiny rush of authority. The family maliciously complied by painting the cover beige, but added a massive glow in the dark, smiley face. 4. You have probably heard of noise complaints over blasting music. But what about the aggressive sound of sizzling meat? A disgruntled resident called the police, claiming the rhythmic hissing of burgers on a flat-top griddle was psychologically tormenting and ruining their evening meditation. The reality check here is that noise ordinances are based on decibel levels, not culinary textures. Unless those beef patties were screaming at 80 decibels, which is the volume of a running garbage disposal, the cookout was completely legal. I guess some people just hate the sound of flavor. 5. Food safety is important, right? Well, a guy checking his chicken with a standard flashlight at dusk was reported to the authorities for using high-tech surveillance equipment to spy on the adjacent patio. Standard grilling logic dictates you must ensure poultry hits an internal temperature of 165 degrees. Pointing a flashlight at a chicken breast is not international espionage. It is just a desperate attempt to avoid giving your guests salmonella. It is terrifying how quickly people jump straight to government conspiracy theories over a flashlight. 6. Picture this. A woman storms over to a backyard party, demanding the host stop grilling hot dogs immediately. Her reasoning? The smell was making her golden retriever bark uncontrollably, and she felt the only solution was for the neighbors to switch to boiling vegetables outdoors. You cannot make this up. Legally, you cannot compel a property owner to alter their entire diet just because you refuse to properly train your dog. The police advised her to just close her windows. She was genuinely shocked that the universe did not revolve around her pet. 7. Has anyone ever called a federal agency on you? One backyard chef was reported directly to the Environmental Protection Agency. The complaining neighbor stated that the use of charcoal lighter fluid was a localized ecological disaster, single-handedly destroying the ozone layer. Look, drowning your briquettes in lighter fluid is definitely a crime against the taste of a good steak, but it is not a federal environmental emergency. The agency obviously threw the complaint in the trash, proving some people wildly overestimate their own jurisdiction. 8. Tape measures and toxic neighbors are a dangerous combination. One resident measured the distance from their wooden fence to the neighbor's grill and filed an emergency complaint because it was exactly 5 feet and 11 inches away. The local fire code mandated a full 6 feet. When the fire marshal finally arrived to inspect this terrifying 1-inch violation, they realized the complainer's own fence was built illegally close to the property line. The grill owner got a warning, but the complaining neighbor got a massive citation for illegal construction. Instant karma is beautiful. 9. Culinary discrimination is apparently a thing now. A neighborhood board member sent a highly aggressive warning letter to a family for grilling generic store-brand hot dogs instead of premium butcher cuts. The argument was that seeing cheap processed meat degraded the elite, luxurious atmosphere of the community. There is absolutely no legal precedent for regulating the socioeconomic status of a sausage. This perfectly highlights how community authorities often blur the line between maintaining standards and completely losing touch with reality. 10. We have a deep respect for wildlife, but this is pushing it. A local birdwatcher called the city to demand a 3-block ban on outdoor cooking. She claimed the smoke from a neighbor's hickory wood barbecue was making the local sparrows cough and driving them away from her premium seed feeders. Scientifically speaking, birds have incredibly highly efficient respiratory systems. A little drifting hickory smoke is not triggering an avian health crisis. The city clerk actually hung up the phone. Drop a comment if you think the birds were actually plotting against her. 11. Envy makes people do incredibly stupid things. A man called the county health department claiming his neighbor was operating an unlicensed underground restaurant in their backyard. The terrifying truth? It was just a standard 4th of July party for extended family. Health departments only regulate commercial food sales, not private gatherings where Uncle Bob is giving away free ribs. The complaining neighbor was just deeply bitter that he did not get an invitation to the party. Weaponizing government agencies over a bruised ego is just sad. 12. A woman sent her neighbor an itemized bill for $500, claiming ambient barbecue smoke permanently stained her white luxury bedsheets that were drying on a clothesline. Let us look at the physics of this situation. Unless she hung her linens directly inside the active smoker chamber, right next to the pork shoulder, drifting yard smoke will not permanently dye fabrics. A simple cycle in a washing machine with normal detergent would completely fix the smell. But common sense is rarely a factor when there is an opportunity to be outraged. 13. Backyard games are a staple of summer, unless you live next to a self-proclaimed structural engineer. During a relaxed cookout, a neighbor called the police claiming the sound of beanbags hitting a wooden cornhole board was causing foundational damage to their property. Let us evaluate the kinetic energy here. A 1-pound canvas bag landing on a piece of slanted plywood from 30 feet away does not generate enough seismic force to crack concrete. The responding officer had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing in the caller's face. 14. Apartment living comes with strict rules, but this tenant took it to another level. They called management screaming that the person downstairs was running a toxic waste incinerator on their patio. The manager rushed over in a panic, only to find a tiny electric George Foreman grill cooking a single piece of chicken. Fire codes strictly prohibit open flames on covered balconies, making electric grills the only legal and safe option. The complainer just hated the smell of garlic powder and decided to escalate it to a hazardous materials emergency. 15. Have you ever been accused of causing global warming with a door? A homeowner called the non-emergency line because a neighbor hosting a cookout had propped their own back door open to let guests in and out. The caller passionately insisted this was recklessly letting all the neighborhood cold air escape into the atmosphere. This demonstrates a stunning lack of basic thermodynamics. You cannot hoard outdoor air temperature. The dispatcher politely explained that the outside world is not an air-conditioned room. 16. Joy is strictly prohibited in some neighborhoods. A community committee ordered a resident to immediately take down their outdoor string lights during an evening cookout. The official reason? The yard looked too festive and resembled a commercial amusement park, which violated the visual tranquility guidelines. The lights were literally just 3 standard strands of warm white patio bulbs. The resident complied with the order, but creatively replaced the string lights with 2 massive, highly legal, industrial security floodlights. Problem solved. 17. A few drops of spilled sauce almost triggered a hazardous materials response. A man filed a formal grievance because some barbecue marinade splashed onto the shared property line sidewalk. He labeled it a deliberate biohazard attack and demanded the neighbor pay for professional chemical cleaning. While spilled soy sauce and brown sugar is a tragic loss for the meat, it is absolutely not a toxic threat to human life. A garden hose and 5 seconds of water pressure completely neutralize this so-called biological weapon. 18. Law enforcement officers deal with a lot of heavy situations, but arresting people for happiness is not one of them. A disgruntled resident called the police to report that the people at the barbecue next door were laughing too aggressively. The caller felt this loud joy was a targeted personal insult directed at their own quiet weekend. There is zero legal threshold for acceptable happiness in a residential zone. The officer on the phone actually suggested the caller consider buying noise-canceling headphones, or perhaps finding a fulfilling hobby. 19. Imagine having to pay a tax every time you fired up the grill. A local activist group petitioned their city council to implement a mandatory meat smoke tax. They wanted anyone hosting a barbecue to pay a per-hour fee for polluting the air with the scent of animal products. From a purely legal and logistical standpoint, taxing a specific cooking smell based on dietary ideology is impossible to enforce. Who exactly becomes the official neighborhood meat smell inspector? The city council quickly dismissed the proposal as completely unhinged. 20. You cannot control the weather, but some people certainly try. A woman complained that the water from a neighbor's lawn sprinkler, which kids were running through during a cookout, was artificially increasing the humidity in her yard and ruining her outdoor reading session. Summer heat combined with water obviously creates local humidity. But claiming legal ownership over the ambient moisture levels in the suburban atmosphere is next-level entitlement. You simply cannot dictate a microclimate just to protect the pages of your paperback novel. 21. A rogue paper plate almost led to a massive lawsuit. A neighbor threatened legal action because a sudden gust of wind blew a single, unused paper plate into their pristine flower bed during a backyard party. They formally cited aggressive trespassing and the illegal dumping of hazardous solid waste. While actual littering is a real problem, an act of God blowing a lightweight piece of cardboard does not constitute malicious dumping. The host immediately picked it up, but the neighbor still demanded a legally notarized letter of apology. 22. Block parties are supposed to bring people together, unless the organizer is a culinary dictator. At one neighborhood event, the self-appointed leader loudly scolded a family for bringing a homemade potato salad that deviated from the official pre-approved menu. They actually demanded the family take their food and leave the public street. When you organize a casual potluck, you do not suddenly gain the legal authority of a health inspector. Policing mayonnaise-based side dishes is the ultimate sign of a person desperately clinging to control. 23. Basic chemistry can be very confusing for angry neighbors. A concerned citizen called the fire department in a panic because the flames coming from a fancy new propane grill next door were blue instead of orange. They assumed the neighbor was burning illegal toxic chemicals. The reality is that a tight blue flame on a gas grill indicates perfect, highly efficient combustion. By complaining, the caller accidentally proved that their own grill was likely burning dirty and needed maintenance. The firefighters gave a quick science lesson and left. 24. How many chairs are you legally allowed to own? A homeowners association sent a massive violation notice stating a resident had deployed an unauthorized number of folding chairs during a family cookout. The strict aesthetic limit was 6, and they dared to have 10. These obscure rules are usually meant to prevent people from permanently hoarding junk on their lawns, not to stop grandparents from sitting down. The family found a genius loophole by having 4 guests sit on large plastic coolers, which technically classified as food storage, not furniture. 25. Jealousy is a very powerful emotion, but unfortunately for this caller, it is not a recognized crime. A man complained to the police that his neighbor's massive, high-end offset smoker was an offensive display of wealth that was causing him severe emotional distress. He seriously claimed that the rich, fragrant smell of expensive cedar wood was a targeted psychological attack designed to make him feel poor. The police cannot issue a citation just because someone has a better patio setup than you. Sometimes you just have to accept defeat. 26. Have you ever been accused of summoning ancient demons during a casual Friday cookout? One neighbor called the local authorities claiming the backyard tiki torches were part of a dark, occult ritual meant to curse the block. Let us ground this in reality for a second. Citronella oil is scientifically formulated to repel summer mosquitoes, not to open portals to the underworld. The responding officer had to patiently assure a trembling adult that buying patio lighting at a local hardware store does not automatically make you a warlock. 27. What is the absolute first thing you do when you pick up a pair of grilling tongs? You click them together twice to make sure they work. It is a universal human instinct. Well, one resident filed a formal harassment claim because the host next door was clicking their tongs too aggressively. They stated the metallic snapping sound was a deliberate intimidation tactic. Let us be entirely clear. Checking the spring tension on your kitchen utensils is not a threat to public safety. The hostility is entirely in the complainer's head. 28. Technology and barbecue apparently do not mix for some people. A tech-obsessed neighbor demanded a backyard party be shut down immediately because the barbecue smoke was allegedly blocking their home internet connection. Let us look at the fundamental physics here. Wireless routers transmit data via radio frequencies, which effortlessly pass through walls, solid wood, and glass. A thin cloud of vaporized pork fat is not going to disconnect your Netflix stream. The truth is they just had a terrible internet provider and desperately wanted a scapegoat. 29. Your choice of clothing can apparently become a legal issue. A man wearing a classic dad joke apron that said, "Kiss the cook," was reported to the neighborhood association for promoting public indecency. The neighbor claimed the apron was a direct form of sexual harassment. Under the First Amendment, wearing a mildly cheesy novelty apron in your own backyard is protected free speech. It is not an enforceable legal contract demanding physical affection. You really have to wonder how these easily offended people survive a trip to a standard shopping mall. 30. The simple act of cooling your drinks can trigger a meltdown. A furious resident filed a severe noise complaint because of the sound of ice clinking inside a plastic cooler. They argued that the scraping sound of someone grabbing a cold beverage was intentionally designed to disrupt their afternoon nap. Ice shifting against plastic is a basic result of friction and gravity, not a calculated acoustic weapon. Unless the host was throwing blocks of solid ice against a metal gong, this complaint was absolutely baseless. 31. We usually hear about vegans complaining about meat, but what about the exact opposite? A purely vegan homeowner was grilling seasoned jackfruit, and a neighbor complained that the yard did not smell like real America. They actually demanded the host cook a mandatory beef tribute just to respect the local culture. You cannot legally mandate patriotism through dietary choices. The government does not have a compulsory meat consumption law. The audacity to try and force someone to buy a steak just to please your nostrils is wild. 32. Geography is a very difficult concept for some concerned citizens. Someone living in a completely landlocked suburban city called animal control in a panic. Why? They firmly believed the smell of a neighbor's honey-glazed ribs was going to attract wild grizzly bears to their subdivision. Let us review basic wildlife distribution. If there has not been a bear in your city for the last 200 years, a rack of pork ribs is not going to magically spawn one out of thin air. 33. Aerial surveillance over a plate of hot dogs is a new level of creepy. A man used a camera-equipped drone to hover directly over his neighbor's yard to inspect their grill for alleged code violations. The homeowner simply sprayed the drone with a garden hose. The drone operator tried to sue for property damage. Here is the legal reality. Flying a camera low over private property violates serious peeping Tom laws and airspace privacy rights. The homeowner was totally legally justified in giving that invasive plastic toy a bath. 34. Lawns are meant to be enjoyed unless you live next to a self-appointed turf inspector. A woman demanded her neighbor pay for professional grass fluffing because the guests at a backyard party had temporarily flattened the lawn by simply standing on it. She claimed this visual flatness was a distressing eyesore. Grass is a highly resilient biological organism, not a priceless antique rug. It naturally springs back up in a few hours. Demanding financial compensation for standard foot traffic on dirt is a spectacular display of entitlement. 35. Let us look at how wildly homeowners associations can misinterpret their own bylaws. A family left a large wheeled cooler on their patio overnight after a successful barbecue. The board issued a $500 fine for storing an abandoned, unregistered vehicle on the property. Yes, because the cooler had two plastic wheels and a metal axle. They legally classified it alongside broken-down sedans and rusty tractors. Punishing a family over a plastic icebox shows exactly why people dread living under these committees. 36. The choice between paper and cloth can get you reported. A host was scolded by an uninvited neighbor for providing paper napkins instead of heavy linen cloths during a casual backyard burger cookout. The complaint stated that using disposable paper products actively devalued the prestige of the entire community. Let us apply some logic here. You do not use expensive Egyptian cotton to wipe barbecue sauce off your chin. Enforcing high society dining standards at a casual summer cookout is incredibly pretentious. 37. Astronomy is hard to understand when you're looking for things to be mad about. A resident complained that a neighbor's brand new stainless steel grill was too shiny and was reflecting sunlight directly into their living room window. They demanded the grill be painted matte black immediately. Here is a scientific fact. The Earth rotates, which causes the sun to move across the sky. That reflection probably lasted for exactly 20 minutes. You cannot force someone to deface their expensive property just because you refuse to close your blinds. 38. Vigilante justice takes many bizarre forms. A woman actively reached over a wooden fence with a high-pressure garden hose and sprayed her neighbor's active charcoal grill. Her excuse? She stated the fire just looked a little too hot for her personal comfort. This is highly illegal. Reaching across a property line to extinguish someone else's expensive dinner is textbook trespassing and vandalism. Not to mention, hitting hot coals with cold water creates a massive ash explosion. She literally created the exact safety hazard she was trying to prevent. 39. Spontaneity is a crime in some suburbs. A man demanded that his neighbors submit a formal written schedule of all future cookouts 3 months in advance. His reasoning was that he needed to plan his outdoor breathing times around their meat smoke. You do not need a municipal permit to live your life in your own backyard. Requesting a quarterly corporate itinerary for casual weekend hot dogs is not just controlling, it is a sign of a deeply exhausting personality. 40. Cheese selection can apparently cause deep emotional damage. A block party turned sour when a resident complained that the host was using standard American cheese on the burgers instead of sharp cheddar. The complainer called the processed cheese an offensive insult to their sophisticated palate. When you are eating free food provided by someone else's generosity, you lose the right to act like a Michelin star food critic. If you demand premium dairy products, you should probably stay home and cook for yourself. 41. Biology can be very confusing for angry people. A neighbor threatened to press criminal assault charges because the smell of grilling onions made their eyes water from across the fence. They claimed the host was deploying a chemical weapon. Synpropanethyl S oxide is the natural, harmless chemical irritant released by onions, not military-grade tear gas. Unless the host was actively rubbing raw onions directly into the neighbor's face, no crime was committed. Crying over a vegetable is entirely a personal problem. 42. Sidewalk chalk is apparently a massive threat to suburban security. A community board tried to shut down a family barbecue because the children had drawn a hopscotch board on the driveway. The complaint legitimately labeled the colorful squares as unauthorized gang symbols that would attract organized crime. Let us take a deep breath here. Pink and green unicorns drawn by a 6-year-old are not territorial markers for the mafia. This level of extreme paranoia must make living absolutely exhausting. 43. Sports rivalries can turn adults into absolute toddlers. A neighbor filed an official emotional distress claim because the family next door had a grill cover featuring a rival football team's logo. The complainer stated that being forced to look at the logo from their kitchen window was causing severe psychological trauma. The law does not protect you from seeing things you simply do not like. If a piece of waterproof fabric with a sports mascot ruins your entire weekend, you desperately need professional therapy. 44. Let us talk about automotive paranoia. A homeowner sent a massive bill for a premium car wash to the guy grilling next door. The claim? They insisted that microscopic airborne grease particles from the burgers were raining down and ruining the clear coat on their leased sedan. Unless you are deep frying a turkey inside a wind tunnel, cooking fat does not travel 40 feet through the air to attack a vehicle. The host offered them a single wet wipe and told them to have a nice day. 45. Some people genuinely believe they are federal agents. An angry neighbor barged into a backyard party and demanded to physically inspect the host's meat thermometer. They claimed they had a right to ensure it was properly calibrated to avoid a neighborhood health crisis. You are not a certified inspector for the United States Department of Agriculture. Trespassing onto private property to demand scientific calibration records for a pork chop is insane. The host simply handed them a beer and told them to leave. 46. Forcing your lifestyle on others is a classic party foul. A neighbor who crashed a private backyard cookout was deeply offended and complained to the host that there were no vegan options provided for the neighborhood. Keep in mind, this was a private, invite-only event, and this person was not even on the guest list. You cannot crash a private gathering and then demand the catering be tailored to your specific moral philosophy. The sheer audacity required to complain about free food you were never offered is staggering. 47. Intellectual property laws are incredibly complex, but this neighbor completely misunderstood them. A woman marched over to a backyard cookout and accused the host of copyright infringement. Her legal argument? The smell of the barbecue sauce was identical to her late grandmother's secret recipe, and she demanded immediate royalty payments. You cannot patent an airborne scent, and you certainly cannot charge licensing fees for a mix of brown sugar and ketchup. The police actually had to tell her to stop quoting imaginary business laws. 48. Gatekeeping. The concept of grilling is a serious hobby for some. A man complained to his neighborhood watch because the guy across the street was using a modern gas grill instead of traditional charcoal. He claimed this lack of authenticity was lowering the neighborhood morale and making them look weak to outsiders. Cooking food with propane is a perfectly valid, highly efficient method used by millions. Attaching your personal masculine identity to the way another grown man cooks his dinner is profoundly weird. 49. Creative problem solving is strictly prohibited by some property boards. A homeowners association actually fined a resident for placing a giant watermelon in a plastic kiddie pool filled with ice water to keep it cold during a party. The citation called it an unauthorized agricultural storage facility. A plastic pool designed for toddlers is not a commercial farming silo. Punishing someone for a harmless, highly effective summer cooling trick shows exactly why people despise dealing with community rule enforcers. 50. This one breaks the laws of human anatomy. A woman demanded direct financial compensation for what she called secondhand calories. She seriously claimed that breathing in the heavy scent of bacon-wrapped jalapenos from the yard next door was forcing fat molecules into her bloodstream and ruining her strict summer diet. Here is a quick biology lesson. The human olfactory system absorbs scent molecules, not physical dietary fat. You cannot gain weight by smelling meat. If you could, every single restaurant worker would be medically obese. 51. Paranoia can turn a normal weekend into a spy thriller. A neighbor called the police claiming the irregular sizzling sound of a hot grill was actually a secret Morse code message being broadcast to local criminals. They insisted the host was communicating target houses through meat fat. Droplets of marinade hitting hot metal create random acoustic pops, not complex tactical communications. The responding officer politely suggested the caller stop watching so many espionage movies and perhaps take a long, relaxing walk. 52. Summer cookouts usually involve water games, but one neighborhood board treats them like international waters. A family was fined because their kids were using a bright yellow inflatable slip and slide during a barbecue. The official HOA violation labeled the plastic toy as an unregistered maritime vessel parked illegally in a residential zone. Yes, they legally equated a piece of wet plastic from a toy store to a commercial fishing boat. The family responded by asking where they should dock their highly dangerous inflatable pirate ship. 53. Have you ever looked at a pair of barbecue tongs and felt a deep sense of physical danger? One extremely paranoid neighbor called the police to report a man brandishing a bladed weapon at a neighborhood cookout. When the heavily armed officers arrived, they found the host holding a standard, long-handled metal spatula to flip some steaks. The caller genuinely believed cooking utensils were classified as dangerous martial arts weaponry. The cops ended up staying for a quick burger, after realizing they were called out over a spatula. 54. Popcorn is apparently a deadly projectile. A man threatened an expensive civil lawsuit because a rogue, unpopped kernel of corn from a backyard party somehow landed on his pristine concrete driveway. He called it an act of aggressive littering that damaged his property value. A single kernel of corn weighs a fraction of an ounce. A passing bird dropping a feather creates more physical impact. Threatening to involve expensive lawyers over a microscopic piece of snack food is the definition of a fragile ego. 55. Helping out the family can get you reported to the government. A highly concerned citizen reported a family to Child Protective Services because their 16-year-old son was trusted to stand at the grill and flip the burgers. The caller labeled this as dangerous, illegal child labor. Teaching a teenager basic cooking skills and responsibility is simply good parenting. It is not an abusive sweatshop environment. The authorities quickly dismissed the absurd claim, but the stress it caused the family was completely unnecessary. 56. Modern digital meat thermometers are incredibly helpful, right? Well, one neighbor called the police to report heavy industrial equipment operating illegally on a Sunday afternoon. The culprit? A Bluetooth meat thermometer that let out two tiny electronic beeps when a steak hit medium rare. The caller insisted the sound was exactly like a commercial dump truck backing out of a construction site. Comparing a tiny kitchen gadget to a 5-ton construction vehicle is a staggering leap of logic. The officer just advised them to buy thicker windows. 57. Eating corn on the cob requires hands, but that is unacceptable to some people. A complaint was filed with a neighborhood board about guests eating ribs and corn with their bare hands. The angry resident called it highly uncivilized behavior that made the community look like barbarians. Barbecue is literally designed to be messy, tactile finger food. If you are eating smoked ribs with a silver knife and fork, you are doing it entirely wrong. Let people enjoy their food without enforcing Victorian-era dining etiquette. 58. Holding two things at once is not a crime. A resident called the police on their neighbor because the host was double-fisting a metal spatula and a can of beer while standing at the grill. The caller insisted this was illegal public intoxication and reckless endangerment. First of all, it is private property. Secondly, holding a beverage while cooking is the absolute standard operating procedure for every backyard chef in the country. The police did not even bother sending a patrol car for this nonsense. 59. Street parking is a battleground in the suburbs. A homeowner refused to let barbecue guests park on the perfectly legal public street in front of their house. The reason? They claimed the colors of the guest cars violently clashed with the color palette of their expensive front garden flowers. You do not own the public asphalt, and you certainly cannot regulate the paint jobs of vehicles driving on city infrastructure. The guests parked there anyway, leaving the neighbor to aggressively glare at the cars all afternoon. 60. Some people take neighborhood aesthetics to a truly clinical level. A homeowner filed a formal grievance with the community board because the host next door was making uneven, handmade smash burgers instead of perfectly round, factory-pressed patties. The complaint stated that the irregular shape of the meat violated the community guidelines for visual symmetry and architectural standards. Applying strict geometric regulations to ground beef is the ultimate sign of a broken mind. Food is meant to be eaten, not measured with a protractor. 61. Have you ever been so angry you tried to fight the solar system? A woman furiously demanded the host of a cookout turn down the sun. Yes, the actual glowing star at the center of our solar system. She felt the barbecue was happening during the hottest part of the day and blamed the host for the uncomfortable ambient temperature. The host gently explained that they lacked the cosmic power to dim the sun. The woman stomped away, completely dissatisfied with the limitations of human existence. 62. Federal crimes are very serious, but this is definitely not one of them. A highly agitated man reported a cookout host directly to the United States Postal Service. Why? Because the party guests occasionally walked near his mailbox while talking. He claimed this was federal interference with the mail system. Walking on a public sidewalk near a metal box on a wooden post is not mail tampering. The postal inspector likely had a fantastic laugh reading that absolutely unhinged complaint report. 63. Have you ever used a small plastic spray bottle of apple juice or water to tame grill flare-ups? A furious resident recorded their neighbor doing exactly this and sent the video directly to the local fire marshal. They demanded the host be arrested for operating an unlicensed, improvised fire extinguishing system. Squirting 3 drops of water onto an aggressive charcoal briquette is basic temperature management, not a violation of municipal safety codes. The fire marshal ignored the email completely, probably while shaking his head in disbelief. 64. Medical paranoia at a cookout is a wild thing to witness. A highly concerned citizen called the authorities claiming their neighbor was running an unlicensed underground medical clinic on their patio. The horrifying evidence? They saw the host using a large plastic flavor injector syringe to pump marinade directly into a pork shoulder. The caller thought the host was performing illegal surgeries on raw meat. The police had to explain the very basic culinary concept of injecting apple cider vinegar into a roast. 65. Etiquette is important, but involving the authorities is taking it too far. A woman called the non-emergency police line because the people at a backyard barbecue did not say "bless you" when one of the guests coughed loudly. She felt this lack of basic manners was a disturbing sign of moral decay that needed official intervention. Law enforcement officers are not armed etiquette instructors. There is no legal mandate forcing citizens to bless each other. The dispatcher politely suggested she mind her own business. 66. Pet psychology is a very strange field. A resident demanded their neighbor stop using a motorized rotisserie to cook a whole chicken. They claimed the rhythmic spinning of the golden poultry was deeply hypnotizing their indoor cat, causing the feline to stare out the window for hours. Cats stare at literally everything. A spinning chicken is basically television for a predator. You cannot shut down a man's dinner plans just because your pet found a highly entertaining source of visual stimulation. 67. Culinary fraud is apparently a real concern in some neighborhoods. A guest complained directly to a community board because they discovered the host used a store-bought marinade instead of making it entirely from scratch. They felt deeply betrayed and called it an insult to the art of grilling. Unless you paid an entry fee expecting a gourmet, artisanal experience, you have absolutely zero right to complain about the preparation of free food. Just eat the chicken and be grateful someone invited you. 68. Let us talk about insane neighborhood marketing rules. A community association sent a formal warning letter to a resident for using a standard Weber-branded charcoal chimney starter on their patio. The complaint legally classified the metal tube as an unauthorized corporate billboard because the company logo was visible over the wooden fence. Lighting your charcoal with a standard piece of hardware does not make you a secretly paid brand ambassador. The resident maliciously complied by wrapping the chimney in entirely unlabeled tinfoil. 69. Let us finish with the absolute peak of neighborhood entitlement. A man literally called 911 on a Sunday afternoon to report a robbery. What was stolen? Nothing. The caller was furiously watching a backyard barbecue from his second-story window using binoculars. When the party ended and the host started packing away the leftover ribs, the neighbor called the police because the host did not walk over and offer him a free-to-go box. He considered the denial of free meat to a spectator as an actual criminal offense. Can you even imagine the dispatcher's stunned silence? So the next time you light the grill, remember your neighbor might be dialing 911 over the smell of garlic. Now, answer me honestly. What is the most unhinged, petty revenge you would take on a neighbor who called the police over your potato salad? I want your most legally questionable ideas below. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and never invite the HOA.